Oh no!
As of today, Ichiro Oda turns 50 years old. And it's honestly very impressive that Oda has been able to continue a long-running story with captivating characters and captivating legendary tales to tell for generations to come. And he's been doing this for decades now. I don't know how he has it in him, but speaking for myself as an American audience member, I can say for certain that One Piece has went from something that was really niche and obscure to being more culturally mainstream. You see, One Piece's cultural impact is inescapable, and for such a tale that is so massive and so grand in its scale, that it has to be able to speak to people, especially its audience members, at a human level. And that is exactly what Oda has been able to achieve with his tale of One Piece. So then, that is exactly what this video is going to be. What makes One Piece so important to us? And I actually, for this video, have brought on a guest.
Hello everybody, hope you're doing good. My name's Mrs. Gabby and I'm super pumped to be in your newest video, Skylar.
And thank you for coming on the show. You know, speaking for myself here, I think what makes One Piece so impactful to me at a personal level has to do with just me trying to fight to even have a voice in the first place, trying to be able to stand up for myself and being able to have that thick skin, especially when all odds are against me. But also, you know, I always find it very important to stick up for your friends, especially those who are also struggling. I know, speaking for myself as a kid, I would have wanted someone to stick up for me when, say, I was getting bullied or when I was not able to fully articulate myself. And I know that Luffy is not the brightest tool in the shed, but every time I watch One Piece, I see that person who I wanted to have in my life in Luffy. And you know what, in a way, I kind of strive to be Luffy, just a little bit, you know? Obviously, I'm not gonna have Gum powers, I'm not gonna have Gear 5, but I still want to be that person who sticks up for others. Because I know as a kid, I would have wanted somebody like that to stick up for me. So that's the kind of person I want to be for others.
One Piece has a lot of themes circulating around it. The corrupting power of greed, what it means to be just, and my personal favorite, what it means to be a family.
You don't even care about treasure? Why else would you be in the game? Well, fine. What are you looking for then? I want a family.
If you're a based and true-pilled subhead like me, you're very familiar with the phrase Nakama. The Viz translation of the manga usually keeps us as crewmate or friend, and that's not necessarily wrong. It's important to note that transliteration is labor-intensive, has short deadlines, and doesn't pay that well. I have a deep appreciation for those working over at Viz and other translation teams, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to enjoy One Piece without a Japanese textbook in my hands. With that being said, Nakama, in my opinion, is more closely associated with words like brother-in-arms or comrade, and I think that speaks a lot more to the anarchic nature of pirates as a whole.
What kind of garbage is that? Oops, my anarchy symbol.
With the Straw Hats taking arms against impossible odds, it's their friendship and camaraderie that really gives them the strength to make it through, as opposed to just simply friendship.
Everyone, put your hands together, and I'll mark us with a special sign.
What gives, Taya?
It's a symbol of our friendship.
No.
And this speaks to me as a trans woman that's had to navigate queerness on her own for nearly 30 years. And, you know, along the way, I've been able to pick up some pretty incredible friends. When I had nowhere to go, it was a really dear friend of mine that gave me a home. When I've needed money or gas or a car repair, it's always been a friend or three that's reached out to help. Family, as I know it, is more than just my blood relatives. It's the people in my life that have been there through the darkest parts of it.
Did you ever stop to wonder why we treated your injuries in the first place?
To be quite honest, I didn't notice.
We're all just prisoners down here. I took you in and treated you because your friend begged me to do it.
Starboy did what? He was trying to help me and got bitten by those wolves. Please take care of him. He's my friend!
That's not something just anyone would say, not when they're on the verge of death.
And One Piece really exemplifies this with people like the Heart Pirates, Nico Robin, Luffy and his brothers. And to Oda's credit, I've been really happy to see that he's shown the more harsher sides of found family, like with Germa 66 and, Doflamingo's entire crew.
Yeah, we have quite the rabbit hole to go down towards today. So, Mrs. Gabby, why don't you start off? Tell me about something in One Piece, in particular, that really stood out to you.
Nico Robin's a great jumping off point. She's had just a life colored in tragedy. She was the brilliant daughter of an archaeologist, Nico Olvia, but she had been abandoned and left in the care of her uncle Orin. She's been faced with abuse and neglect, and her greatest comfort has always come from her time spent with the other scholars of her island, Ohara. She eventually meets a giant, the ex-marine named Jaguar D. Saul, and, he's her first real friend. Unfortunately, the world government dispatched its navy to commit one of the cruelest acts of institutional violence I've ever seen in fiction, the Buster Call.
Everything's going smoothly. All the pirates are lined up on the island, just in time for the Buster Call.
A Buster Call? That means...
Yeah, the Navy's gonna eliminate everything and everyone on the island.
Every occupant of Ohara was committed to death for the crime of learning about the Void Century, and only a young Nico Robin had managed to survive. Left alone and wanted by the world government, Nico Robin's faced betrayal and sabotage no matter who she ran to. Her eventual employment for Crocodile's Baroque works provided a pittance of safety, until, of course, the dastardly warlord tossed her aside. It's only after being saved by Monkey D. Luffy that Robin's afforded the time to consider her own happiness, and she nearly rejects it after being threatened by CP9. The Straw Hat's bold defiance against the world government, the cruel entity that sent Robin on this crooked path, is what finally allows her to accept that she is worth living. She is allowed to be happy.
Robin! There's still something I want to hear you say! Help me! You want to live!
I can live. Face it, your whole existence is nothing but a crime. The whole world's against you, Robin. You can't be allowed to live.
I never dared to wish for something like that.
The sea's a vast place, so I guarantee someday you'll find friends who won't ever leave you.
And I want to live! Take me with you! Take me away from here!
Seeing Robin's tearful exclamation of "I want to live" still fucks me up, dog. And then there's an honorable mention to Frankie for saying existence is not a crime. That shit goes hard as fuck. I love Frankie. And that's what we mean when we talk about found family, right? Nico Robin's compounding trauma and inability to trust others made it difficult for her to interact with others. Then you get a group of people that take her in, no questions asked. And like most folks I've known in that situation, she doesn't know how to act. Like, what do you do when you've got all that fucking baggage? You can't just flip a switch on and go, okay, it's like, that's what I love about Water 7 so much. We get to watch Robin wrestle with this deep, burdening guilt against her equally deep desire to feel loved.
You know what though, I totally get where you're coming from, because Robin is also one of my favorite characters of all time within the One Piece cinematic universe. Cinematic universe? Anyway, but with all of this exhibition about Nico Robin coming to realization that her life is worth living and that she found her family, it's also just worth mentioning that her found family, being the Straw Hat Pirates, are fighting against an oppressive system that rules with an iron fist of absolute justice, and that the complexities of culture and history are ruled over by the world government with such a binary rule of law.
No.
Like, to the pirates, it's very clear that the government is the antithesis of freedom. But what I also found very fascinating in some of my rewatches of One Piece is every time you see Smoker and Tashigi kind of grappling with themselves as to whether or not, like, their role in the world government, or the Marines in this case, is a justified role. One of my favorite moments in the Alabasta arc is when Tashigi is on her knees and she's been brutally defeated by Nico Robin, and then Straw Hat Luffy comes around and he's just like, where the hell is Crocodile? Because he's about to go kick Crocodile's ass. And, Tashigi, given that she has the ability to make an arrest, refuses to arrest Straw Hat Luffy because they're in the middle of a fucking war where Crocodile, who is a warlord of the sea, is pulling the strings. So instead, she helps Straw Hat Luffy. She tells him where to go, and she also backs up the Straw Hat crew in the war. Now, of course, this is not to glorify or legitimize the world government or the Marines within the One Piece universe, but it's also one of those things that I like to sometimes remember is the Chris Dorner effect, that even police officers hate the police themselves. And thus Tashigi, in that moment, utilizes her own sense of justice away from the binary structure, which, can get her in trouble in the long run. And to think about Tashigi's relationship with her occupation, she only has Smoker to run towards, and Smoker is a really cold motherfucker, whereas the Straw Hat crew, they're homies. They hang out together. They've got each other's backs, seemingly unconditionally, all through thick and thin here. The pirates have solidarity with one another, and you can't really say that with members of the world government. And they're always at odds with each other when it comes to their own sense of humanity and morality versus their own sense of authority and totalitarianism. Like Monkey D. Garp, who is Luffy's grandfather, who also had to adopt Porpoise D. Ace from Gold Roger. Even though Monkey D. Garp is kind of a fucking jackass, he at least developed a fatherly relationship to all of his underlings, whether it be Kobe and Helmeppo, or Ace and Luffy. And then when you get to the Marineford arc, where everything is on the fucking line with Luffy and Ace, you can tell deep down that Garp is going through an internal battle between what he believes is justice through authority versus his own humanity and his love and compassion for his family. And he's just torn. And while pirates are not great people either, there's plenty of evil pirates throughout One Piece, pirates in One Piece just don't seem to have that moral struggle within themselves that members of the world government tend to hold. It just seems like the Straw Hats tend to know how to maintain a prosperous family.
And another Straw Hat with deep familiar scars. Who am I kidding? That's most of them. I'm looking at you, Usopp. I hope we get to talk to your father soon. Is Sanji the cook. Sanji's been bouncing between a hodgepodge of different families. When we first meet him on the Baratie, he's been raised by his adoptive father figure, Red Leg Zeph, and living as a sous chef. As a child, Sanji had fallen overboard from a ship he was on. He and Zeph, a notorious pirate at the time, were stranded on a dumb rock for 85 days, and Zeph heroically sacrificed what little food they had to keep young Sanji alive, and even took to eating his own leg to sustain himself. Since then, they've both committed to opening the Baratie, a restaurant that sails across the ocean. Sanji would leave this family, thanking them for years of love and support, to join Luffy on their journey across the Grand Line. It's wholesome, right? Finding yourself a family, ultimately moving away to follow your dreams. It's cute, it's the common story. But that's not all there is to it, is there? Let's rewind a bit, back to the boat sinking. How exactly did Sanji get there? What was a 10-year-old doing unattended working as a busboy on a cruise ship? Well, it turns out that good old Sanji is none other than the third son of Vinsmoke Judge, the tyrannical leader of Germa 66. Who are they, you might ask? Oh, just a bunch of emotionless mercenaries that sail their kingdom around to warring countries, fight for whomever pays the most, and claim their treasures for themselves. During Whole Cake Island, we see glimpses of Sanji's troubled life as a, quote, failure among his family. His mother, opposing the scientific experiments being performed on her unborn children, attempted to poison herself to keep her children human. What the fuck? Much to Judge's pleasure, most of his sons were still born with their enhanced strength, speed, and constitutions. Sanji, however, remained human, and this led to years of abuse and neglect at the hands of Germa 66, which inevitably leads him to running away with the help of his elder sister, the one other person to learn from their mother the importance of human empathy. And this entire arc takes its time breaking Sanji's determination down. First, they convince him to attend his wedding by threatening Zeph. Then, once he's actually on board their ship, he's constantly having to challenge his brothers and the world's second greatest deadbeat, second to Yasopp, Judge. Constant petty squabbles, passive-aggressive remarks, All of this keeps Sanji constantly on the outside. These people need him for the sake of convenience, and they say that to his face, but they do not consider him family. And just to be safe, they place these golden bracelets over his wrists that are rigged to fucking explode if he tries to run.
Yeah, I have my reasons for not liking Sanji, but I can also agree that that is majorly bullshit, and I feel bad for Sanji in a way.
At this point, with his friends and family under threat of death, Sanji just gives in. His only solace comes when he finally meets his bride-to-be, Charlotte Pudding, and falls in love. Of course, not even that works out because Pudding and her family are plotting to kill Sanji and Germa, which of course he catches her talking about. This whole scene of Sanji crying is so fucked. The poor dude can't even make a picnic in peace, and his lighter isn't working, and oh, my sweet baby boy, they didn't have to do this to you. Oh. Sanji's at his lowest here, and the remainder of the story takes time to disassemble all of the abuse he's been carrying on for decades now. His older sister reminds him that he was the only one born with emotions. He was the only one saved from the terrible life that their mother was so concerned about. If anything, Sanji is his mother's greatest success. And with his friends, the Straw Hats, finally closing the distance to retrieve him, Sanji was allowed to heal. And the season builds up to that climactic wedding ceremony. There's a lot we can say about Sanji as a character, like how he's not very nice to women, but Whole Cake does a lot to recover some of his image that gets completely tarnished during the events of Fishman and Dressrosa. The single greatest Sanji moment happens right here as he lifts Pudding's veil and she reveals her secret third eye to him. What a beautiful eye. Sanji sees Pudding for the amazing woman and chef that she is. He doesn't see something creepy like her mother constantly asserts. He formed a connection with her that withstood all of the abuse, the trauma, and the pain that she was a part of creating. And throughout all of that, sees someone worthy of being loved. This speaks to Sanji's development over the course of the arc. He's being broken down, but his loved ones were there to build him back up. And when he's at the precipice, he can look down and help someone that's in the same place he was. Family doesn't have to be the people you're related to, and as we've seen in other parts of One Piece, sometimes the guy you're trying to kill turns out to be the best father figure you could possibly ask for.
I want to take a pause real quick and talk about villains that I absolutely love, because I love when a villain hams up the whole show so much that he just is entertaining on his own. However, I think what makes a really good antagonist is when that antagonist can be used to make your protagonist much more likable, and in this case, easier to sympathize with. I am talking about none other than the Saw Shark Fishman himself, Arlong. I'm sorry y'all, I'm probably not the most qualified person to talk about the Fishman in One Piece, but I really just gotta give it to my man Arlong here for just putting on such a wonderful show, and I just gotta gush about it. Alright, let's back up just a little bit here. In Season 1, throughout the East Blue arc, we're introduced to Nami, and Nami kinda has a distant relationship between her and the Straw Hat crew, because she actually has an ulterior motive throughout this arc. At first, she introduces herself to Luffy as a thief, not as a pirate. In fact, she openly expresses her hatred of pirates. There is a reason for this, but we'll get to that in a moment. Later in Season 1, Nami steals the Straw Hat Pirate's ship, and she takes it with the treasure to Arlong Park. You see, Arlong Park is on one of the Konomi Islands, and it neighbors Kokoyashi Village, the village where Nami grew up. You see, Nami has like this almost gimmicky affinity for money and gold. And I mean, I guess it makes sense given that this is an anime about pirates and all, but the fact is that she has a hatred of pirates, but she still has this affinity for money. But that's not without a reason. There's a very bold reason as to why she does have this affinity for money, and that is because Arlong, 8 years prior to the current timeline, invaded Kokoyashi Village, terrorized the whole town, and now does a protection tax against the villagers. And unfortunately, Nami's adoptive mother, Bellamere, was killed because she couldn't afford to pay for herself, but instead she paid for her adopted children. I remember being 13 years old when I first got to this part in the manga, and I remember just being absolutely blown away, because this was not something that was shown in the 4Kids dub, but what happened in the manga was far more gruesome and consequential in the long run. And by extension, it allowed me to kind of reconsider how I view Nami, because in the first season, Nami just comes across as like very brash, very short with everybody, not very patient, very condescending. She's a liar, she steals, and of course, like, ultimately, she's not a very likable character up until you get to this point to where it becomes apparent that she is doing all of this horrible shit to everybody because she's trying to buy her village back, and she's been trying to do so for pretty much all of her teenage years. Meanwhile, there's this marine who is called Nezumi, which literally translates to rat. And Nezumi is such a rat indeed that Arlong has been using the tax money that he's been collecting to pay Nezumi off to keep Arlong's operations on the hush-hush. This allows the government to turn the other way to all of the atrocities that Arlong has committed, but then he starts to prosecute Nami and confiscate all of the gold that she has stolen for the past 8 years and render her as a criminal. Everybody in the village has been keeping quiet about Nami collecting the funds for 8 years, and after they see Nezumi confiscate all the gold and render her as a criminal, they get their fucking pitchforks and they fucking had it, and they're gonna go get that fucking Arlong motherfucker. Nami, who knows full well that the villagers are no match against Arlong, takes a fucking dagger and stabs the ever-living shit out of her Arlong tattoo, and she's just broken. And Luffy's there, and Nami, in tears, asks Luffy for help. Luffy gives Nami his straw hat, which is his treasure, and he's like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna help you, and the rest of the Straw Hat crew march on towards Arlong Park, and they raise hell. And I gotta say, there's a lot of great moments in all of the battles. One of my favorites is when Usopp finally has a victory for the first time, and he did it on his own too. And it's just such a great moment just seeing that he's like so proud of himself that he actually won a fight for once. And we know that wasn't easy for him at all. I gotta just appreciate the fact that they just took Luffy's body, which was sunken underwater, and stretched his fucking neck all the way to the surface, like a whole tube. And when Luffy and Arlong are in Nami's map room, he destroys everything in that room. And it's like so symbolic for Nami, because that's like 8 years of fucking hell that she's had to go through, all to serve her fucking oppressor. And when Luffy wins, just like Mrs. Gabby said earlier, Luffy says, Nami, we are Nakama, baby. We're homies for life. We're gonna go to the Grand Line and get that One Piece. Let's go. And I just want to say real quick that even though Arlong is obviously the bad guy in this whole arc, there is some things to be said about Arlong himself, because he didn't just come out of nowhere and just start terrorizing Kokoyashi Village. And of course, there's nothing really good to say about Arlong doing trade deals with the Marines so that way they can keep quiet about all of the dastardly things that he does. But Arlong used to be part of a pirate crew of his own called the Sun Pirates. And there's a lot to be said about the Sun Pirates, but too long didn't read. Arlong, as well as several other fishmen, used to be slaves in the Marie Joie, which is pretty much where the ruling class live. They're called the Celestial Dragons. And in a way, Fishman Island, which is where Arlong is from, kinda acts as an apartheid, where fishmen are kind of restricted to be within Fishman Island, and they can't really assimilate to the rest of the world. Thus, the concept of the Sun Pirates is for fishmen to go to the surface regardless of the racial taboos. Like I said, there is much more to go into when it comes to the Sun Pirates and the fishmen as a whole. I don't feel like I'm the most qualified to go over it, But I always make sure that whenever I get someone into One Piece and they are introduced to Arlong, I remind them that Arlong himself is a eugenicist, and he has adopted a lot of really harmful beliefs because of the oppression that he has gone through, and I don't really spoil people with all of that extra detail that I just went into, because Arlong Park is only scratching the surface as to everything that there is to learn about the fishmen in One Piece. So just keep that in the back of your head, folks. But with that being said, this is why I like Arlong so much. It's because he makes Nami such a likable character. I can sympathize with Nami even in spite of her flaws, and more importantly, Arlong is just so much fun to watch. He genuinely believes that fishmen are the next evolutionary step right above human beings. And I just appreciate how comically social Darwinist this is. And I think what makes Arlong probably one of my favorite characters in all of One Piece, it's not just of how his performance is, but just his connection to so many parts of the One Piece universe just unlocks so much for us to explore. The role that the Celestial Dragon and Marie Joie play as the ruling class, the inherently corrupt aspects of the world government and the Marines, and the introduction to fishmen. And I just really love Arlong. There's just so much I love about Arlong. I'm sorry, I'm done. Mrs. Gabby, please stop me.
And that brings me to a certain surgeon and his very attractive fail dad. Trafalgar Law was the son of a doctor in a country that decided that they should use lead for literally everything in their state. Somehow, this did not turn out well. The sole survivor of the world's worst case of paint eating ever, Law is suffering from white lead disease and trying to find something to take out his baby nihilist anger on. He waltzes into the territory of none other than Don Quixote Doflamingo, a sinister Spaniard with a hairline as thin as the threads he could conjure with his devil fruit powers. This kid is like 10 years old and shows up covered in live hand grenades. Davi says, "I like your moxie, let's hang," and puts him in the care of his younger brother, Don Quixote Corazon, a silent clown that hates kids. A few months and one murder attempt later, Law discovers that Corazon ain't all he's cracked up to be. For one, he can talk. 2, he's talking to the Marines. 3, he can project a silent area around him to prevent people from hearing him. Corazon covers for the kid when Doflamingo asks about a stab wound, and things progress as normal for the Don Quixote pirates, until Corazon overhears Trafalgar telling the other kids about his, quote, true name, Trafalgar Water D Law, that things begin to change. Corazon is concerned about the D initial because, he and Don Quixote are actually former celestial dragons, and he warns Trafalgar to stay away from Doflamingo. He offers instead to take him around to all of the nearby doctors to see if any of them can cure Law's white lead disease. Yeah, he's still suffering from that. Unfortunately, this proves fruitless, until they find out the Opi Opi no Mi was found by pirates nearby. So there was a fruit. With the help of some local Marines, Corazon sets themselves up to betray Doflamingo and give the fruit to Law in hopes of it curing his illness. Daffy, however, has caught wise of Corazon's rash behavior and consciously avoids the sting operation. One botched robbery later, Corazon's gravely wounded and needs to quickly hide baby Law in a nearby treasure chest. Pirates never look in these things, he says with way too much confidence. His last act of kindness is to silence Law and stay alive just long enough for the boy to escape to a neighboring island. This is where he meets his new friends, whom would form the Hearts Pirates. Do you get it? Corazon, Heart, in Spanish, Heart Pirates. He named his crew after his dead dad. I'm so fucking upset. This is one of those dramatic background narratives that's just fucking sad. Oda knows how to write a sad backstory, and this one always gets me. My dad was shit growing up, and I really wish Corazon was my clumsy fail dad. Honestly, the story isn't as nuanced or compelling as the other two I've mentioned. It's just like a personal favorite. The narrative through line between finding a damaged but supportive home and realizing what a proper human connection is with someone is there. But, you know, it's nice. It's sad in a comfy way. The themes of diplomacy between an abuser and their victims are also there. Listen, crime families need found family too, goddammit, okay?
I mean, absolutely, considering the fact that the Don Quixote family is literally, like you said, from the Celestial Dragons. And you know, I find that part, as well as what you said about Trafalgar Law and Corazon, to be absolutely fascinating to look into as well. Doflamingo and Corazon's father being a Celestial Dragon is an interesting backstory in and of itself, though I would say not very sympathetic or relatable. What do I mean by this? Well, you have to understand that the Celestial Dragon, being the ruling class, they're nobles of the family that pretty much founded the world government over several hundred years ago. And considering that the Celestial Dragon are slave owners themselves, they're not really likable people too. So then imagine you are Doflamingo, who is like a child at this point 33 years ago, to where your meals are served to you on a silver platter. You don't know a life where you can't just demand people bow down to you. You're practically living it up from the day you are born. You're just lucky by circumstance. And then one day your father has this harebrained idea, hey, I want to be with the other humans. I want to live with the people because I find them to be quirky. And then all of your father's peers are calling him a heretic, they strip him of his Celestial Dragon status, and you and your family are sent to an island that's not under the world government's jurisdiction, so you don't have that governmental protection anymore. Now, let's just state the obvious, because I know somebody's gonna say it in the comment section. Doflamingo is a spoiled little brat.
Where are the slaves, Daddy? Shouldn't they be the ones to unpack? It's their job. If they ran away, we should buy some new ones.
My, don't you look handsome.
No! I'm not a slave! I won't wear this crap! This is peasant wear! Plus, I'll stink if I wear this junk!
I'm gonna need you to calm down.
Once he's on that island, he has to explore what it is like to, earn your food instead of being served your food. And eventually word has it, all over the island, that they used to be Celestial Dragons, to which the town revolt against them. They burn down their mansion, and they start hanging members of the Doflamingo family. And I'm just gonna be honest with y'all, I love this scene. I don't care if this makes me look bad, I fucking love this scene. You can see the emotion and the tears and the anger in all of the villagers' eyes.
My daughter was their slave. She barely escaped her captors alive. She came home devastated and killed herself 3 days later.
I too suffered as a slave. My eyes, because of you, I am blind. I'll never get to see my wife again. You treated us like animals. So why should we give a damn, huh? Because of the heavenly tribute we must forfeit to you. Our beautiful nation succumbed to famine. Have you ever been hungry a day in your life?
Out of all of the things that they have gone through, the torment, the suffering, and the sweet revenge that they crave, and now they have the ruling class at the palm of their hand. Of course they're gonna try to fucking kill. Somehow they survive, but Doflamingo, still a kid, shoots his own father. And I must remind you that that is also Corazon's father. And as Mrs. Gabby told you about how Corazon was Trafalgar Law's father, Doflamingo kills Corazon, his brother, as well. And that is just so fucking sad. It seems like every time that Doflamingo assembles a family or has some kind of resemblance of a family, he tends to be the one to tear families apart. And considering what happened to Dressrosa, where so much of the working class was literally turned into toys, all for the sake of working for Doflamingo in indentured servitude, you also have the warrior Kairos, who was turned into a nutcracker and separated from his daughter Rebecca. And that's just fucking sad. There really is a theme of Doflamingo separating families from each other, all while maintaining his own little empire. Wow. That got dark really quickly. But I mean, hey, that's also why villains are so fucking likable, because they make your protagonist characters that much more relatable.
But if I had to talk about my number one source of found family, it'd have to be my goat, Monkey D. Luffy. His headstrong determination and heart of gold have surrounded him with allies across the world of One Piece. From the Straw Hat Grand Fleet to the remnants of Gold Roger and Whitebeard's crews, this little ray of sunshine can make a friend out of almost anyone. But he wasn't always an Emperor of the Sea, and he wasn't always as tough as he is now. He used to be a big crybaby, and all he had was his two brothers, Ace and Sabo. Across a detailed flashback arc, we see how these three came in to be inseparable from each other. Garp, Luffy's grandpa, drops him off with some mountain bandits to raise him to be fighting fit for the Marines. Unfortunately for him, Luffy wants nothing more than to be a pirate, and that desire only grows after he meets Ace, another one of Garp's charges. Ace is a bit older and wants nothing to do with the big rubber crybaby. But of course, Luffy follows him around everywhere because, oh boy, another kid! This leads to him finding Ace's secret hideout and meeting his secret friend, Sabo, the boy that lives in the nearby Gray Terminal, a community of scavengers living in a trash heap. Over the course of their friendship, the trio causes all sorts of chaos between dying and dashing and beating up scumbags in alleyways. Eventually, they get separated after Sabo's dad finds him and forces him to return home. See, Sabo isn't actually poor, he's kind of pretending that his family isn't rich as fuck, but he does genuinely care about Luffy and Ace. This is a great example of a core theme of One Piece. It's not about your background, but your character and actions as a person. Sabo could try and be the perfect son for his snobby parents, but that's not really the life he wants to lead. He wants to be free and explore the world and see what it has to offer. Ace wants to step out of his father's shadow and find a place where he can be his own man. And well, we all know what Luffy wants to be. Skylar, insert clip here. Thank you.
My name is Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates.
Luffy. You're gonna be a Marine, and you're gonna like it.
No!
These three have completely different backstories, but they share a fondness for adventure that brings them together. And that's what makes it even more tragic when Sabo is seemingly killed by a roaming celestial dragon. Dude pulled out a fucking bazooka on a 10-year-old. That's crazy. And for a while that was it. Luffy and Ace lost their brother and they had to live with that for the rest of their lives. It wasn't until 2 years after the Summit War, after Ace died, that Luffy saw Sabo in the flesh again. Sabo had been rescued, thankfully, by Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's dad, and was on a completely different path from Luffy. He wasn't a pirate, but a revolutionary. And the chief of staff, even. The moment where Luffy realizes that his brother is alive and that he's not alone anymore is so heart-wrenching. I love his big old melty eyes as he holds onto his big bro. Melty eyes when somebody is crying are like the best. And of course, Sabo inherits Ace's will via the Flame fruit, and the circle is complete. The brothers are reunited once more, if not physically, then in spirit at least. It's a really beautiful story of childhood innocence giving way to a very grim reality, and yet persevering through that hardship to become a better person on the other side. Neither Luffy, Ace, nor Sabo have lost their desire for adventure, and the near tragedy of Sabo probably helped serve to galvanize Luffy and Ace's desire to resist the world government.
Sabo is also one of my favorite characters in One Piece, and you know, I can't shake the feeling that Sabo reminds me so much of Peter Kropotkin. Both started off in nobility, and then they abandoned that nobility, and then they went on to be revolutionaries and liberators and all that stuff. It's really cool to really just think about the comparisons. I don't think that Ichiro Oda directly influenced Sabo from Peter Kropotkin, but we do know that he does have an affinity for Che Guevara, and yes, Che Guevara kind of bled just a little bit into the world of One Piece. But you know, I'm trying really hard to just think about what is my all-time favorite part of One Piece? What's the one thing in the whole story, thus far at least, that I could say for certain is my favorite part of One Piece? Because it's gonna be very hard to top literally Luffy's backstory. He's the main character, and I mean, you gotta do it right with the main character here. But I think I figured it out. I think I know my favorite part in all of One Piece, and that's a pretty hard bargain here. I'm gonna say it. Skypiea, the whole arc, is fucking amazing. And it is easily my favorite part of all of One Piece. And I say this as a mythotheist here. It is so relieving that an entire arc is dedicated to literally fighting God. No, let me just back you up for a moment here. The arc begins with a ship falling down onto the Straw Hat Pirates ship, like from the sky, literally from the fucking sky. And they have to excavate this ship to see what's the deal. Why did the ship just literally come falling down from the sky? And they find a map and they find some other junk. But through their findings, there is a hint that implies that there is an island in the sky, and this fascinates the ever living fuck out of Luffy and the crew. Obviously, some members like Nami tend to have their suspicions, as they always do, but that also incentivizes them to investigate places like Jaya. You see, Jaya is an island that is full of pirates, and these pirates are kind of like assholes for the most part. But among the pirates, they find Mont Blanc Cricket, and Mont Blanc Cricket is the descendant of Mont Blanc Nolan, a Christopher Columbus wannabe from hundreds of years ago who claimed to his own king that there was a city of gold on an island that was Jaya. And they never found this city of gold, and thus Mont Blanc Nolan was executed. And you see, the legend of Mont Blanc Nolan has rendered him and his entire family a bunch of liars. Or at least a bunch of dream havers whose heads are in the clouds. Quite literally. Where Mont Blanc Cricket reveals to the Straw Hat Pirates that there's something called a knock-up stream that pushes water up into the sky through volcanic activity underwater. And thus, the Straw Hat Pirates sail to where the knock-up stream was, and the knock-up stream pushes up the Straw Hat Pirate to the sky. And when they get to Skypiea, they're just in absolute awe and fascination with everything that they see, with the way that clouds and dials work. It's like a whole different world up there, with even their own form of currency. But they eventually learn about this place called the Upper Yard, a place that is not made of clouds, but is made out of soil, like back on Earth. And it's revealed that the knock-up stream pushed up half of Jaya into the sky, and that the City of Gold is within the confines of the Upper Yard. In other words, half of Jaya is basically the Upper Yard. And I'm gonna be honest with you, the first time I got to that part of the story, it literally blew my fucking mind. Because, as you can imagine, a City of Gold was not built out of nowhere. City of Gold was built by the indigenous people that were called the Shandorians. Or if you read the manga, they're referred to as the Shandians. You see, the Shandorians, they value something called Verth, which is basically soil from the Upper Yard. And that's because the Shandorians used to be on Jaya back on Earth, and thus the knock-up stream pushed the Shandorians up into the sky as well. And by extension, the Skypieans pretty much colonized the Shandorians, kicking them out of the Upper Yard. So the Shandorians' goal throughout the Skypiea arc is pretty much to defeat Anaru, which is a man that is considered God among the Skypieans. And I just really appreciate not only seeing indigenous people being represented in anime, but also specifically indigenous resistance against colonialism in anime, specifically in the Skypiea arc. There's more that I could say about the Shandorians and their cultural relationship to Mont Blanc Nolan. I could talk about Calgara and Nolan and their very lightly gay relationship that, oh my gosh, it's kind of fun to watch more than it is to tell. It's just really entertaining to watch, and honestly, it's also very inspirational. And I just gotta say that because of that, Skypiea is easily my favorite part. Out of all the other parts, my favorite part of One Piece.
Honorable mentions to the Sun Pirates. They're a crew of fishermen who attack marine bases to save as many slaves as they can. They're directly tied to Boa Hancock and her Island of Women. It's really interesting, you should look them up. I would have given them their own section, but they better serve as an analogy for political organizations rather than a family, especially with the way that they split up from each other later on. And with that being said, back to you, Skylar.
I was gonna kind of give an honorable mention to Yatsu the Hedgehog for his backstory, but because he's literally blue-haired and his name is Yatsu the Hedgehog, there's too many Sonic the Hedgehog references that we could make to this, and it would make this whole section very unserious. So when you, the viewer, get to the Wano arc, look out for Yatsu the Hedgehog. You won't be disappointed. And that's gonna be it for this video, because I want you all to get curious about One Piece and to look into Ichiro Oda's work. Look, Ichiro Oda is not perfect. The way that he draws women, not fucking great. The way that he interprets trans people is pretty hit or miss. And, if I'm gonna be honest with you, the way that Ichiro Oda sometimes depicts people of color, or whitewashes other people of color, is kind of disgusting. But I don't think it's untrue to say that for every very problematic caricature that he creates, there are thousands of characters who are women, who are LGBTQ+, who are people of color, all of whom are very inspirational and extremely well written. And I mean, my hat goes off to Ichiro Oda. He just turned 50. And you wanna know something? He deserves a fucking break, okay? And I mean a much longer break. Shonen Jump. Let him fucking finish One Piece at its own pace. Chill. But I want to give kind of some advice for those fans out there who did just sit through all of the spoiler-heavy topics that we went over. You might be thinking, okay, this is all great, but it's so long. There's so many chapters. There's so many episodes. Where do I start? Should I even start it? Is this even worth committing to? I'm just gonna say, yes, it totally is. I mean, if that means you gotta be a pirate yourself, then by all fucking means, go be a pirate yourself, just like Luffy. My recommendation is that you do start from the very beginning, and I do recommend, instead of watching the anime, to read the manga. And I know that so many people are going to be hesitant towards that, but I'm just going to say right now that the manga is a much quicker read than it is to get through the anime. The anime does have fillers. The filler ratio is pretty small, admittedly, compared to Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, and Bleach. But the fillers are still pretty fucking bad, and I recommend skipping those fillers if you can look up which episodes are filler episodes online. There's also the project of One Piece, which tends to pace the anime a lot better than the main anime itself. I also want to recommend just coming into One Piece with the attitude that you're not going to try to catch up as quick as possible. I think that's a Herculean task that I wouldn't wish on my own worst enemy. I'm pretty much at the end of Wano, and that's because I've been reading casually for over 20 years. And Mrs. Gabby has told me to tell you to not feel like you need to read everything in One Piece. Just take it as like any other story. And if you just read the first few chapters, just enjoy that. And enjoy it at your own pace. If you try to make consuming One Piece into a chore, like, oh, I gotta make it to the Egghead Island arc, or I gotta get to Elbaf soon, or I'm not gonna be the top weeb in my anime club, my god, you're gonna fucking hate One Piece. I don't even know everything that there is to know about One Piece. I'm not even finished with the Egghead Island arc yet. Apparently there's some shit going on with Bartholomew Kuma that I don't know about. Don't spoil it in the comment section, nerds. Anyway, Happy New Year, happy birthday to Ichiro Oda, and you should follow Mrs. Gabby on Twitch, where she's gonna have a birthday stream on January 22nd. Go ahead and follow her, give her your subscriptions and Twitch primes, and tell her a big ol' happy birthday from Skylar. Thank you, Mrs. Gabby, for coming on to the show and talking about one of, if not the greatest anime of all times. And a big thank you to Ichiro Oda for making what I consider to be a fucking goddamn masterpiece by epic proportion. Thank you. I just can't express my gratitude enough. Just thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.